All right, a little bit more on control. The people that were kind of running this charade, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, the way that they controlled, I find that even if they give something up, a little bit of true information, it's worth it because they put people in a position where they can be controlled. So even if somebody's saying, like with the Kennedy assassination, there might be people coming out after saying, oh yeah, no, it wasn't Oswald, it was blah, 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 blah. And then they want to get information out of somebody, so they offer up a little bit of true information, and then and that's what, from my bird's eye view of the situation, that's what it feels like, people were kind of quizzing you guys in different ways. And I know you'd mentioned to me before when I believe you said Fetzer first talked to you guys about it or something like that. Or no, when he first showed interest, something about it. If you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, this is absolutely. And, they would keep... Fetzer, I think, knows a lot about what actually happened. He does, I would, I've said this before, and I'll repeat it now. I haven't said it for a while, but I would contend strongly, and he's never denied this, that Fetzer has some fairly close to connection to whoever did 9/11, or he has a strong connection to a group or a number of people that know who did 9/11, because you can clearly see, if you read my book, just the sorts of things you've been saying, where he was obviously allowed to encourage the release of certain types of information, but then kind of try and minimize or shut down the release of other information. And this became particularly apparent to me in relation to the Hutchison effect, which was this energy effect, which was discovered in the 1980s by a Canadian experimental physicist by the name of John Hutchison. And this was a connection that Dr. Wood discovered in late 2007. I think it was like November or December. And she posted some pages on her website about this around that time. And she has mentioned this story herself on a couple of interviews, but she basically had prepared some web pages which I'd talked through with her. She showed me them, and I'd sort of just said, oh yeah, that's pretty amazing, and I can see the obvious connection here now. And maybe, like I suggested, she moved one picture to... In fact, no, I think what I did was I ended up writing an introduction to this. It was just like a summary, so that it had like a little table of about 12 pictures or something, which summarised what she'd discovered. And I suggested she put that on there, or I might have even sort of edited it on my front page, software and blah, blah, blah. And so anyway, she posted that, and then this point, this was sort of late 2007, we were both still involved with this 9/11 Scholars Group, and, we thought that Jim Fetzer, we still thought he was kind of all right, and he was trying to do the right thing, and so she Skyped him or rang him and said, oh, I've got some new pictures to show you, Jim. And he said, okay, well, I'll just get myself a drink and I'll go downstairs, because apparently in his house he had his computer in the basement. So, he got himself a drink, went down. She gave him the link to the new pages, and it said 9/11 and the Hutchison effect, and and then as soon as he saw this come onto his screen, he says, oh, I've just got to make a phone call. And he hung up the Skype and went to make a phone call. So you think, okay, all right. But it wasn't, if that was the only sort of peculiarity, then, you could think it was just that peculiarity. But what happened after that was we then did a talk with Ambrose Lane, who was a radio show host in Washington, D.C., and he had invited us to go onto his program, and this was at the suggestion of another mutual friend of ours called Frank Ferguson, who's based in Washington. And he suggested to Ambrose that we do an interview about this new evidence, the Hutchison effect. So we did that on January the 14th and January the 18th, 2008, which, of course, is now over nearly 7 years ago, coming up 4. And within 16 hours of that broadcast going out, this other 9/11 scholar, who went by the name of Ace Baker, he Ace Baker. Indeed, somebody said to me, never trust anybody who calls himself Ace.
Oh, well, it's sorry to interject here, but just I saw his documentary. It was long and stuff. I've seen it a couple times, but the songs, it just turns into a joke for me. It just turns into a. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have background music, but I feel like he put a lot of effort into it either way. But like to make a production like that and record all that, I mean, some people write songs about anything and like go, but to me, it just kind of gave it that kind of cartoony, surreal kind of like it kind of put it in a certain place for me. Like so if I was somebody that didn't, I thought as if I was somebody that had no clue about any of this stuff, and this was the first thing I saw, what would I think? And I would kind of be like so turned off by, I'd be like, wow, this is a joke, Judy Wood, like that, like, to me, it just would turn me right off. So that's why I laugh a lot at Ace Baker and the other things that he did after that you'll probably get into now.
Yeah, and again, he buddied up to Dr. Wood probably again sometime 2007, and he'd written this song
for her, about her. That's really, buddy. That's suckling on some teat. I'll tell you that. Like that's
indeed. And we later found out that he'd actually copied most of this song from another song. It was very, very similar. I forget the actual name, and the lyrics were very similar as well. He'd slightly modified the tune.
Yeah, just changed the melody a bit
and changed the melody slightly. Exactly, yeah. And so I didn't know that at first. I think it was sometime later that we discovered that. So, you could clearly see that this was designed to, we use this expression of people will buddy up to you, and suck up to you and things like that. And there was another guy who was associated with Ace Baker called Stephen Goodale, and he was involved with making that 9/11 psy-op, or at least I think he may not have been involved directly with that Ace Baker production, but I know that there was an earlier production which Ace Baker started where he interviewed Dr. Wood and Jerry Leapart, and that was in 2007, and Morgan Reynolds, because I've got that on a DVD, and that's where he shoved in this song that you mentioned, the Judy Wood thing at the end. And it was really very cheesy, as you said. So,
especially since the key audience that are going to try and they're going to try to understand this information. They're kind of going to be around my age, about I'd say anywhere from 20s to 40s, 50s, And for them, this definitely spells cheese, Maybe for an older person that kind of, back they grew up in the 50s and 60s where everything was a song, where they said elect Nixon and this and that, and it was normal. But for somebody like me, especially in the 20s, they're going to hear that and they're going to be like, okay, yeah, this is kooky, this kooky. Well, I heard somewhere that this lady invented lasers that could fly underneath water and then into space. They just connect everything that makes no sense. Control is a huge thing.
Absolutely, with this. Yeah. And so this Ace Baker character, basically, it came to a head for me with this 9/11 Scholars group because Fetzer did a podcast with Ace Baker, and he was talking about the Hutchison effect being a load of rubbish, and he said that John Hutchison was a fraud. And he basically, Ace Baker personally went on a character assassination campaign of John Hutchison. And I wrote that all up in the book, or,
with the bits fake video.
Writing. Yeah, correct. And he made a fake video and said, "Oh, this is my fake video. It looks exactly the same."
Well, I have a question about that. When you saw the video, how can you even take it seriously? I'm not saying that you did, but like John's been at this for years and years, and then you have Ace Baker, some audio engineer that has done music stuff too, and suddenly he's saying that he could recreate it just like that. To me, that's like, all right, Ace, okay, you're doing good, yeah. Like,
exactly, pat him on the back, and so yeah, that's do you want some candy or something, and it's just like crazy stuff, and I wasn't taken in by it, but I found it interesting. But it was good that he did it because we were later able to prove that he lied, because he said that he created the Hutchison effect, and then he said no. He admitted later he hadn't. He said he'd he just made this thing up.
If you thought his credibility was gone after that, which I kind of thought, then you'd get into his fake suicide on air or whatever.
Oh yeah,
wow.
I mean this is where you get the weirdness factor. I mean we've had a lot of things like this where well, a number of things where people just act extremely weirdly.
Yeah.
And as you said, he claimed that he was getting very upset by the video fakery argument, because there was people in the video fakery camp all arguing amongst themselves. I mean, there was this, we won't really get into that very much because I didn't really get into it, but he claimed that he'd been insulted and ridiculed and he'd become very depressed about this. And so you hear him talking about this and sort of going and moaning on Fetzer's interview, and then he says, "Oh," and you hear the sound of a gunshot. And apparently Fetzer called the cops, and they went round to his house and found he was okay. And it's just crazy stuff.
It's
crazy stuff.
Why would you, if you knew how important this information is, why would you ever risk doing something like that? Art is art, but facts are facts, and you're not going to get through to people with art about 9/11. I don't think, at least. I mean, you can draw the pictures you want, but the facts are going to speak for itself. A picture like that picture I was talking about with WTC7 standing and nothing else in the foreground, that no matter what art you make, that's going to say a lot more.
Absolutely. And, so going back to the scholars group, so Fetzer and Ace and myself and Dr. Wood at that point, and we're talking around about February, March 2007. I can't remember the exact date without going to look in my notes and everything and my articles. But it's around about that sort of time, February, March, April time. And so they did this podcast. This is Ace Baker and Jim Fetzer. And Ace Baker says, I've been receiving hate mail from Andrew Johnson. Hate correspondence, I think was the actual word he used. And I thought, well, what's he talking about? I've never sent this guy hate mail. I've asked him some questions, why he was, making these fake videos and stuff like that. But I certainly didn't say, I'm going to do anything to you, or I think you're a complete, whatever. I didn't say anything like that. And so I basically asked them on the next program, I says, look, can you please clarify that I did not send you or Ace Baker or anybody any hate mail? I object to that statement. So could you please read out this statement, on your next program? And I was pretty polite, and I said, look, I did not send this hate mail. Ace Baker made a mistake, and, I'd like Ace Baker to apologise to me for accusing me of doing something I didn't do. And then Fetzer just blew up at this, and he said this was totally unreasonable demand, and it certainly wasn't a demand, it was a request. But I specifically worded it as a request because I was pretty certain how Fetzer would react, and that he'd claim it was a demand. So that was a lie, because it wasn't a demand, it was a request.
Yep.
So, if he's going to have this sort of reaction to something very minor, relatively minor accusation, to me that was proof that this guy was disingenuous. And, if he'd made a genuine mistake, or Ace had made a genuine mistake, because he had a bad day or something, then they had an opportunity to basically fess up and and set the record straight. But they chose to attack me.
Yep.
So it was at that point that I knew that I didn't wish to be associated with these people anymore. And so that's what I wrote up in the article, because I was, by then I sort of knew what was going on, but I wanted to take steps in a kind of neutral way, which would make me sure that that what I thought was true, and so that was basically, I said, look, take my name off the scholars group now, and I'd basically probably written a number of the articles about the breakup of the group by then. I'd probably written about at least 7 or 8 articles. I'd written 3 articles about this Ace Baker affair and a couple of articles about the Fetzer control mechanisms. And all of that I was doing really was 2 things. One was I was documenting what actually happened, and I was trying to unpick the psychology of what they were doing and really write that out in a way which would allow people to understand what they were doing. And I think judging by, what you've just sort of described earlier, I think you've understood it. You've understood what they were doing and how they were working. And that process really for me was, because I'm from an engineering background, and I've had to solve problems and at times reverse engineer things to work out what the problem is so I can fix it. I was simply applying those sorts of thinking processes to what was before me and writing about it.
Well, that's wrong, Andrew. That's not the way to go about it. You're supposed to see something on screen and then just talk about it like a red dripping liquid, and you're supposed to go nuts with it. So
that's right. That's right. You're not supposed to understand it. You're just supposed to regurgitate the talking points, and and get with the program.
Don't think for yourself. Let us think for you.
Don't think for yourself.